Good evening, good people, good even-minded, even-handed people that are among us. Um, Good evening to you. It's a blessing to cherish in each other's countenance this very evening. Rest in peace, Ellen Page. Rest in peace. We all know what happened when it was determined that she would no longer be with us, and we are very sorry. We are solemnly ashamed of the time that we didn't make good on with Ellen Page, and we rest in peace. Rest in peace, Ellen Page. All of us are friends. All of us are acquaintances, at least with her, and we love her. But I just wanted to talk to you about The Weakest Link, the game show, and the game show, The Weakest Link. There's been a couple versions of it. There's a newer version of it that's on TV now. But I wanted to talk to you about The Weakest Link and the way that it used to go down on there, because the contestants that they got for The Weakest Link, it's really unfortunate that the people that they got, because everyone that they got didn't know how to make their own decisions. But like when it comes to banking or something, people just they'll either keep the money or they will let it go. But you're supposed to, in The Weakest Link, you're like answering all these questions in a row, in a chain. And then, so there's like 8 contestants or something. And then they all have to answer. They get a question one by one. And then it's like sequential so that it's not, so it's sequential. So they have to answer the questions. Each one of the contestants has to answer their question, and then it moves on to the next person. And so they have to answer the question, but if they get one wrong, then the chain gets destroyed because they have to say bank before they get a question wrong in order to cash in on the money they've made per question on the chain. So if they get 4 questions right, I don't know if there's some multiplying effect that makes it exponential. I don't think so. I think that they get the same amount of money for each question, but in different rounds, then the same amount of money per each question is higher in like the second and third round, I'm pretty sure. But they vote somebody off every round. So you vote off the weakest link. But in reality, the show is called The Weakest Link. They started with 8 contestants. The first person that gets voted off is the weakest link of those people. So that show is actually named after the first guy that gets voted off in every new episode. That guy is the weakest link. And that's what the show is talking about. But like people so when it comes their turn, they have to answer the question, but they have to say bank at the beginning before they answer their question if they want to keep the money. If it goes to the question, then they could lose it with a no. But if they get it right, then the chain continues. So there might be some multiplying effect that like they incentivize a longer chain. Yeah, I believe so. I believe it's not even. I think that I think that the money value gets higher with it's just like, but it's not an even rate. I don't know what the term is, but it's a little bit exponential. Is the rate at which they get money if they get a longer chain of correct answers. But they have to say bank beforehand if they want to keep the money. But you can earn a grand total of like however many thousand in each round possibly, but nobody ever makes it there. Nobody ever makes it like 20% of the way to what the possible winnings could be in this show, because they never do it right. But it's because there's some people on there, when it comes to banking, they're just like, oh yeah, let's cash the money. So everybody that's on there just they do one of the two things every single time. The people that say bank every time it's their turn, whether it was just like $100 or $5,000. They just say bank every time because they're a person that collects the money. And then everybody who lets it go every time because they're a person that wants to risk it. And they didn't like change up their decisions to fit the situation at all. And it was just very disappointing, some of the actions that they came to, because they're not like, hey, I'm on a fucking game show. Let's try to win money here. Like, how many times have these people been on game shows that they think that they can just dawdle up there and then like a robot repeat the same thing every time, like not change the situation? How many times have these people been on fucking game shows in their lives? I mean, people just don't cherish their moment on the game show, and it's just like, it's heated. It's perverse. It's perverse when they don't. It's a perverse activity. They get on a fucking game show and they're like, bank, 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 we keep the money every time. You can't change who you are for a fucking second. This is the most glamorous thing that's going to happen in your entire life. You can't change who you are. Do you realize what's happening? But maybe some people value game shows higher than others. It's like you're on a fucking game show. You have to do something interesting. Or you have to, I don't know, you have to do something interesting. You have to be accurate. Take the time to be accurate. Say bank when it needs to be. Like, it doesn't have to be anything special, but through your accuracy, you prove that you're a good decision maker. Just show to the world that you're a better decision maker than just, but I guess if you're just in that mood where you're like, I always bank. The people that banked every time. They couldn't get people that would switch up their decision. That was one of the flaws with the weakest link. The earlier the weakest link, they always had they always had morons. Nobody ever got anywhere close. I didn't see any of the new weakest link, but I'd imagine that they fixed that problem at least a little bit just so that they could give out some more money. ABC kind of likes more of a show like that. They like a winner, so they'll probably make it. They've set it up. They have a fund set aside for the weakest link. I think it's on ABC. I'll have to look that up. This is fact checking in real time. This is the fact that needs to be checked. It's the weakest link. The weakest link. Oops, typed in the weelist link. That's not going to help me. The weakest link. The weakest link to 2021 channel. Good as any. Oh, it's on NBC. I think the original was on NBC. See, I don't remember. I'm not going to look up. Was the original on on NBC? Was the original on the Discovery Channel? Was the original on ESPN Classic? Was it original The Weakest Link on ESPN Classic or ESPN Classic 2 or ESPN Classic News? Was it on News Classic Central? Or was it on Old Classics Daily? Was it on Perverse of Yesterday's News or of Yesterday's Old? I don't know. I guess we'll reckon our way to another set of thought processes. I guess we'll just reckon our way there. Things are to be reckoned. Things are to be, well, I reckon, I aim, I reckon, I guess, I estimate. Well, I reckon that I imagine, conceive of, I believe that, I reckon that, I imagine it will happen that this, it will happen that we will, I reckon, I guess, estimate, anticipate, I imagine that, I reckon that, we move on. I reckon that, what do you say the most after reckon? Like, if it was Family Feud, the most reckon phrases, that's the kind of question I'm asking. How many reckon phrases? And what is the top one? What's the top reckon phrase? I believe it would be, I reckon we move. I reckon it'll happen sooner rather than later. I reckon we will get there. I reckon it'll happen. I reckon, but it might be a more Southern expression. Well, I reckon we head over them hills. Now I reckon we decide soon. Now I reckon it'll happen. It'll happen. Now I reckon, well, how much have we covered? Let's just take a look back. Let's think about where we were, where we've been. Let's think about where we were first and then where we've been second. Let's realize where have we been? Where have we been? Where have we been in this country? Like, we look at it as a country. Where have we been in this country? Where have I, you shouldn't be where have I been? Where have we been? We need to take a look back at where we've been. You need to infuse your past into a collective past so you can recognize the past of a collective. Recognize the past of a collective that doesn't necessarily pertain to you. Recognize the past of all of collectively the rest of the country. We need to recognize the past. Like, why don't I just want to? Well, I really can only recognize mine because, I mean, as far as pasts are concerned, my past. People talk about their past. Hey, you know what people do? They talk about their past. I'll tell you a tall tale about my past. I don't know. I wouldn't talk about my past on here. So, sorry, almost got me. Like, what would explaining your past do? Let's talk about the idea of explaining a past. This is what we will talk about today. And today, the idea of when you explain your past. And now, from collectively, what happens in your past? Well, what happens in your past is it is time gone by. What happens in your past is that's your past. Goodbye. It's your past. You have to move on, or you can live in the past and be like, I like it. But the past, you know what that contrasts with? The future. The past is that's you got to go there. That's fun for you if you want to get there. Is it fun to be in the past? Is it nostalgic? Is it nice and juicy? Is it like you? That's nice. I like to think and soak up the past. Is it like, please help me remember the past? Yeah. Is it like a drug? It's like a drug to remember the past. Like to think about it, to talk about it. Yeah. It's just like think about that past. Like if you just want to talk about the past, like, oh yeah, just remembering memories. Can't you just suck on your memories like they're wonderful to you and you just indulge in them? You can just suck up and indulge in your memories because they're available to you if you want, and they're just like right there if you got nothing else. This is from my past, yeah, and then you can't even stop talking about how much from the past that it is in your life, and it's just like your favorite memory, but it's just you can just have it as part of the thing that changed you to a different direction. Like, oh, this is part of my story in life. This is what happened to me. Because like there'll be people that travel around telling you about their story about how sad it was, you know. There's a couple of people like that were doing sermons at my college that they're like, it's part of my, like their whole thing was just talking about this horrible chain of events that happened in their past. Like it's shockingly, like you kind of get a platform at some point. If you get enough shocking things happen to you in a row, then you get a platform but you should make good on that. Like, wow, that's like you get to tell your story. Well, the past, you know, and we again talk about the past, but we can talk about whatever on the past podcast on the identity. You talk about the past, you know, don't get into that past. Don't get too far into it. Don't get too far into your past. Don't live in the past too much. Are you living in the past? I mean, is it okay? You can probably live in the past at least a little bit. You got to remember things. You like get historical on them. Get your story. Get his story on them. But yours is his asterisk story. His asterisk story. Get that on them. Get his asterisk story on them right now. It's like it's N asterisk sync. Is that what that band is? N asterisk sync. Oops. I went and typed in NSYNC, so that's actually not going to help in my quest to figure it out in a timely manner. And no, show me where it's got a punctuation mark. I know there's a punctuation mark between sync and N. N. Let's see if it comes up if I put in an asterisk. N asterisk sync. Is that really what it is? Oh, I can't find it. I got to look at a logo. There's a star. No, it's what? No, it's actually a star on the very far left of the entire phrase NSYNC, and their logo is actually at the point that they were drawing it up this way, showing everybody this as that they are NSYNC with a star attached. The font that they use basically looks like Sears, and it's like looks like a and it's blue, looks like a Sears logo, as dead as the Sears logo looks in representation of all of Sears. That's like how bad the Sears logo is. I can't believe the NSYNC is like, it looks like it's modeled after that. The kind of font that they used. The font that they use is just like these swirly ass S's. It does just bad. But you don't need to think about that because I was thinking it was N asterisk sync, but it is a star on the very left side of the NSYNC, a star attached to the N, and the N is a different color. And the star is the same color as the different colored N. So it's like a star that is appropriate only for the N. And because it's the same color, the N and the star are the same color. So it's like the N is changing out of NSYNC to be recognized as N with a star attached to it. And sync is the rest of it. So it's like star N sync, but it's kind of like the star makes the N the different colors, like changes it. So it's NSYNC beforehand, but then this star comes in and helps you recognize that they are NSYNC, that they are NSYNC. But like, well, it's really just, or the star could just be there in front of, it could be a replacement for the I. If it was in sync, it could be because it's right in front of the entire word. It's not between N and sync. It could be a replacement just for the letter I, the same way that you lose letters with contractions sometimes, but you don't ever lose a vowel in a contraction. They're like, so this is the first phrase anybody's ever created that was a punctuation mark taking the place of an I, like a contraction for a vowel. This is the first instance of a contraction for a vowel, possibly because of that star. But also, if that's the first instance of that, that's how you denote it. It's with a star. So like a star always means if it's a word that is using punctuation mark, like a contraction for a vowel, then it's you replace that vowel with a star instead of with an apostrophe. Because I'm being an idiot, and you know that for like 3 minutes now, because they do replace O's. They replace O's. They just don't replace I's, like a won't, will not replaces an O. Shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't, didn't, don't, won't, shouldn't, shart. No, you don't really put an apostrophe in that. That's its own word. Shart is that's its own word. So I think like in my mind, it would be changing the whole word in if the star is supposed to be a representative of substituting for the I. It removes the whole word in and changes it to a different color. But it's really just like N. There's something special going on with the N is mostly as much as they probably thought about it. That's as far as they thought, is they're like, well, we need to switch up the N. Let's put a star next to it. So it is kind of like you could imagine it to be an asterisk where there's like where there's some periodical information after the N, like sync. Like it's an N. By the way, there's also like sync is part of it. Like, and that's what I want it to be. You know, I feel like maybe they meant to speak to N. Asterisk sync, because asterisk was less developed in the American mind, not the American mind, the American mind. I write psychiatry books. The N, like asterisks were less represented before the Barry Bonds era. Barry Bonds came along, then we knew, because we're like, oh, we want to make light of the asterisk. Asterisk becomes important, becomes part of our vocabulary. We start to understand what an asterisk is more. We've never even done that with a fucking ampersand. We're fucking barely on the ledge of ampersand. We still don't know what the fuck. Like that hasn't entered our common language, really. Ampersand, like we're like, or that's what I'm talking about, right? Or just but the at symbol, everybody knows that. $, obviously. Exclamation point, yeah, of course. Of course, people know that. But like the ampersand, people know what it is. It's just like there's just to the entire public, it's not really, hasn't gone mainstream. And but asterisk, we're like, oh, there's a special N, and then asterisk sync. There's sync periodical information, like, oh, by the way, it's like it's in the notes, like the asterisk, it's in the notes. By the way, this is a sync version of N. There's a sync NSYNC, but there's like, so there's N and then there's sync attached to it. There's like sync is part of NSYNC. N represents a whole different word, but is like the sync that attaches to it is, by the way, is attached to the N. And it is part of it is very much like a thing you need to know about the N. Like there's as ipso facto, if it's like an if then statement, the thing, but there's kind of like this periodical information that's literary about an explanation, like a way that you have to explain it in the show notes. That's more literary, so that you are speaking to the vocabulary of literature people and recognizing a more specific definition or an explanation or a connotation or an acknowledgement or a tag, like an advertising tag, like an extra promotional explanation, like a sale for 50% off or something. Like it's just kind of like a, by the way, buy one you get one free, or you actually there's a deal, or actually N and then sync. NSYNC, by the way, there is what you should know as the reader. It jumps out at the page at you. The sync is like, oh, there's actually, but you have to recognize NSYNC and what they've contributed to the world. Don't forget about what 98 degrees, like what the fuck is wrong with these bands? Do they do a degree sign? No, NSYNC, maybe that's part of it. NSYNC is like, the way we advertise ourselves. I like what you're doing with that degree. We're going to incorporate a little bit of that into this product NSYNC. Ooh, the degree worked. Maybe people like degrees, and let's put a little something on the end. There's I wonder if that's how they always portrayed it as N. I feel like I've seen a gap between N and sync before, but I guess I just imagine it. I see one here where it says a giant capital N that covers the length of the entire word sync, but the N is over the sync. N is also taller than the sync. So this picture that I'm looking at is an NSYNC logo that they used to have, that it was, it's like a whole box worth of sync, like two of the words sync would fit exactly in the capital N length, but the capital N length is sitting on top of sync as if it is a roof, and then a chimney at the very end of where the N slides down to the bottom. And that covers exactly the length of sync, but is 2 times the height. And so it's an area of, it's like a 1-to-2, nice 2-to-1, 1-to-2 ass ratio between the areas of both of those. It's exquisite to look at. But not really. It's really not. Oh, look, I found one though that has an asterisk. When they vibed it up a little bit more a couple of years later, they put an asterisk NSYNC. And then is there a point where they then put the N between the asterisk between the N and the sync? Asterisk N sync. Asterisk N. It's asterisk N, huh? Asterisk N, that's like, but it's not N asterisk. It's asterisk N. Asterisk N. And that's like, it kind of separates it from sync. Like it is kind of like it's already NSYNC. But this one kind of separates it a little bit in space too. So it's like NSYNC. And they did not know what the fuck they were doing with this thing. That is what's evident about it. They didn't know what the fuck to do about this star asterisk. And they're like, well, do we put it between? Do we put it like, should it be a star? Should it be an asterisk? So like different logos later on, but it's probably influenced by 98 degrees that they're like, oh, we like a symbol, but they can't, NSYNC cannot figure out their symbol, but somehow people know that they have one. Like I recognize that they have one through their advertising, that there's like some extra symbol there. Like I remember it that way, but they separate the N and the sync in some of them. And then in some of them, they don't separate the N at all. So they're like, we don't know if the N should be different from the sync or if it should be connected. They didn't know what the fuck to do with this apostrophe N, whatever the fuck. And they're like, asterisk N, but it separates the N. It's like, and it is, so at that point, it's completely pointless. And then I would hope that at the point they recognize that they've gotten to the very rock bottom of this thing's usefulness by putting asterisk n that is separated from sync. I'm hoping that they would then come to the realization that your real only option left is to put the n in front of the asterisk and then the sync after the asterisk. And I hope they came to that conclusion eventually, because nope, that's star in the early ones and asterisk later on. Yes, but the past. It is the past that we come from, and to the past that we, you have to learn from your past, or whatever you want to do. So you want to do you want to learn from your past? Some people are like, just only press onward, only look to the future. I would prefer to just look to the future. I'm not very nostalgic. Some people aren't sentimental. I'm not very sentimental. Not interested in things that happened in the past, but you know how people are like, they talk about a generation that this isn't related to the past really, but people like to get nostalgic about the past, like, and talk about a generation that was born. And that's what we do. And we talk about the decades and the different decades, like, oh, this decade for this generation. We like to talk about how different generations influence us. And we get into like these, like at the time that I was born, there's this idea of the indigo children. And they're like, because something about the aura of the time period as seen by mediums or psychics or something, like the aura surrounding a generation born in the 90s was indigo. And they're like, these are the indigo kids, or there's something special about the indigo kids. But people often bring up this idea, like, of the generation born under a peculiar circumstance or a specific circumstance, like they're like, or generation, or like it could be a literary term for a generation of authors influenced by one author in like some niche way, like where people like some branch or genre of art that's kind of specific, that they're like a generation of authors created under a peculiar circumstance of another specific author, but like only a small group of people know about it, and then they call it the November Kids or something. Like but that for lots of different groupings of generation, like those kind of all, any one of those, because there's a whole litany of those are related to that, either a generation from an author or just a generation born in the late 80s from people who thought a certain way, or people who made their kids grow up a certain way under a peculiar circumstance, or just like but just the idea of birthright, a speciality, like there's some birthmark that gives them the specialness of, because they were born under this star, really, like when it's kind of like astrological a little bit, any one of those, because they're kind of born under this series of influences in the world, like, oh, and then they're the November generation or something. And I think that just all of that entire genre of whatever that is, you should just call it the December Kids. That's the December Kids. Anytime somebody's talking about that, but like, just use the word December Kids to describe the idea of people, like bypass the entire idea, rise above it by being like, oh, that's just your December kidsing. You're describing things in terms of December Kid examples. Like, stop December kidding me. If somebody is talking to you about the speciality of a generation born because of particular influences, whatever, like, that's because they're really just ultimately trying to describe how things are special, right? Like, certain generations could be seen as special, which is kind of like what we do by differentiating generations, when it's like, you could just see it as everybody is just, it's all just like relative every single year is a new, slightly different iteration of humanity born under slightly different circumstances that makes them special. But it's kind of like any defining of generations differently is like it's all good, you know. But defining of generations differently, you're like these, because you don't have to be like these are the December kids. You could just be like it's Generation Y, and Generation Y does its own thing. Generation X does its own thing because they were born under a certain circumstance, but it's like the influences of the time period that you are the parameters for that generation is the special circumstance they were born under. And but like generations based on what generation you are. One thing that happened in the past that I watched in the past that I can't change anything about, that nobody can change anything about. Well, first of all, Larry King died a couple days ago, so that's kind of sad. I like Larry King. So you remember people that died in the past. You remember how a generation was born, or you remember how like the NFL draft went in 2003, and that's kind of like a new generation. It's kind of like a tag for the year that anything happens in. It's kind of like a tag for the what they end up becoming later on. Like the 2003 NFL draft had these 6 players, and so they're always kind of like related in that way. Like the 6 best players that were in the 2003 draft, and also they're related to the busts. But you get to see later on who was right and who was wrong. As you look back at the past, it's kind of like confirms, like, well, that's the only place that you know that, like, oh, these people were wrong and these people were right. And you can see that pretty clearly when you look at the past. It's just that if you're trying to, you might be more interested, like you look at the future, and so you're more in the game of predicting things. And so you're not looking at truth black and white like that, because there isn't like it isn't like you look at the past to see like for sure that something's happening. You might be more of a risk taker. And if you are, you're more interested in the outcomes of potential futures rather than that you look to your past, but sometimes you get, if you look at the past, so you're like 2003, you can look at the year or the decade as a brand of some kind, that it's like the decade is a brand, really. And any time periods are brands like that. They really are. Time periods are brands because like the decade is a tag. Everything that happened that decade is of the themes of the decade, and it has a specific place in the consumer's mind, but it's not really something you consume. It's like a decade or a year that went by. Can you consume the memory of that? I mean, that's more for a collective past, because you have things that are collective pasts versus individual pasts. And for a collective past, thinking about a decade, that's something that everybody can look at and consume, kind of, because it's like a collective memory that we all have a year. But it's kind of like a brand, because it's the 80s is a brand versus the 90s, because they both have different themes throughout them. You remember them different ways, but like ABC can monetize the brand of the 80s by running like the Goldbergs or 80s shows based around 80s sitcoms, but the media does that with 80s, 70s, and 60s, but they've been doing that forever, because like because the Happy Days is about the 50s, but I think it came out in the 70s or something. And but I mean, that's like branding based on decades. They do that in TV a lot. Like that's where they capitalize off of that. The way that a decade sits in a consumer's mind. So it's like you can consume memories like they're commodities or utilities or something. Like, what is the extent of that idea that you consume? like you consume a brand, like the better that it's branded, but the 90s, they don't make an attempt to brand that as much, but it's kind of like the media company. I'd say that the media companies that are in charge of most of the alternative channels, that they're kind of like related to CBS and ABC, but all the programming on CBS, ABC, and NBC, that they're like, they pretty much only know like the 80s is the extent of what they're able to recognize. They recognize the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, but so they can still make money off the 80s, but they don't make any attempt to brand the 90s. The 90s is more difficult. I mean, just the people that are in charge of the media don't have authority over a 90s identity as much. And so whatever does have authority over it, it makes itself known in different ways. But people born in the 90s probably more likely to make themselves known through YouTube rather than cable TV. The past is just sad because it's sad to think about what you lost, really. It's like I'd say that the past would be more objectively sad because the future is more optimistic. The past is about what you lost, because that's what you've lost, or that's what's behind you is your past. And it's what is past. What has passed is what is behind you. That is what is in your past. What you already moved beyond, that you can't get it back either. And so that's what's really sad. It's sad that you can't get things back that already happened, and you can't go back. And you always want to go back and relive your memories. You want to relive times of your life with what you know now, just so you could be like a god in front of your family and friends or whatever. So you're like, you know so much, or just in front of people that were teaching you or something. You want to go back to school and prove how much you know, like now that you know what you do when you didn't know it back then. But you can't go back, and that's what's terrible. It's kind of like the realization that you can't have perfect situations, because you always live in the present. You always live with circumstances that you can't exactly make sense of. I mean, you're always living with that there's new things, rather than that you get to know everything possible for a situation where everybody knew less. Like, you don't ever get to be God, because the world is always new going forward. Something that I witnessed that happened in the past was the Packers lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Packers lost to the Buccaneers, and everybody, it's a pretty devastating loss, because what the fuck are we doing losing to Tom Brady in the NFC Championship game, the day that we have waited for forever? I thought that the Packers would win based on that. If we lost, then what does all of this mean? This game, we had to win this game. And they didn't win the game. And it's like the most disappointing loss maybe ever, because you couldn't let Tom Brady get to the Super Bowl again, obviously. But you know what? They decided that they were just going to go ahead and fucking lose. And don't blame the refs, blame the Packers. And part of the past is like, who do you blame? Who do you blame? And you have to blame the right person, or else, because blaming the right thing allows you to make better decisions into the future. In this past game, really, Aaron Rodgers is the reason that they lost. And I don't know that I've seen anybody explain it that way, that it's actually Aaron Rodgers' fault that they lost. Do you realize that? In most games that they lose, it is not his fault. In this one, it is his fault, because he made a couple of mistakes throughout the game, but more importantly, he became Teddy Bridgewater for the last second half. They were down 18, and he ran the clock down to 0 on every single offensive play because he wanted to go really slow and methodical when they're down 18. He wanted to play it safe. He was playing it too safe. He was acting like Teddy Bridgewater, just throwing 6-yard passes, throwing 7-yard passes when they're down 18. And that the 3rd and goal, he probably could have run it in. Don't make up for his bad mistakes, because there's some people, like most people are like, oh, we have to blame Kobe King. It's like, yeah, Kobe King, yeah, he let that touchdown through, certainly. Kobe King let that touchdown through, but it's not his fault that their defensive scheme was such that he was one-on-one in a situation that the only thing that their defense had to do was defend the end zone, really. Like, that's what you should have been watching out for, I'm pretty sure, because wasn't that on your mind at least a little bit, that they're on the 40, there's 8 seconds left, they might be trying some sort of Hail Mary. Why you have a one-on-one because you're trying to stop them from getting a field goal, getting like 5 yards. You didn't think that they might take a shot. There's 8 seconds left. They have Tom Brady. Kobe King shouldn't be one-on-one with this guy in this situation. It's not Kobe King's fault that they lost. If you're going to blame one player, you blame Aaron Rodgers because of the way that he managed the game and because he tightened up during the course of it. He was very hesitant and not very loose with things. The pressure of the game was getting to him. In another situation, he would have made the right decision on the 3rd and goal from the 8 to try to run it in. Even if he doesn't make it, he gets to at least the 1, and then they have a 4th and goal at the 1 that they can go for it. And also, they should have gone for the 4th and goal when they're down 8 rather than kick a field goal. Obviously, you kick a field goal, that's exactly what Tampa Bay and any Tampa Bay fan would want you to do when you're down 31-23 with 2:15 left. You're going to give the ball like, oh, here's the ball, Tom Brady. Just get 1 first down. The guy who's won 6 Super Bowls, you just give it back to him. So I hope our defense makes a stop. Just not a good decision at all. Just not a good decision when you could throw. You have another chance for a pass to get into the end zone. You have to get a touchdown either way. I think that there's a lot of decisions made that would point to that the Packers were not even ready to win that game. Like, you're not ready to win the game if you're not going to go for it on 4th and goal when you're down 8, when there's 2 minutes, 15 seconds left. Like, that you're kicking the field goal. LaFleur, that's a very bad decision. I think that he's not exactly ready for this big of a moment. He's overrated anyway. I don't trust him in a big game, his decision making, because he's already way overrated for the platform that he's been given as head coach of this team, and just not cool under pressure. I wouldn't say, as indicated from his actions yesterday, he's going to go out and he's like, let's kick this field goal. That's just a white flag. That's just like, we're going to lose, actually. Kick the field goal. Because if you had the right instincts as a coach, you definitely would have gone for it. He doesn't have the right coaching instincts, especially in game. Like, his in game decision making, LaFleur's versus Andy Reid. Like, Andy Reid's in game decision making is a million times better than Matt LaFleur's. And I think if there's somebody you blame Aaron Rodgers, but it doesn't really matter because he's not to blame for the last 16 NFC Championship games that he's lost. He's not to blame for any of those. But that he's in this position now where he's only won 1 Super Bowl at age 35 when he's just about the greatest of all time. But you had to win that game to say that he's the greatest so he could still keep up that argument. And that's the whole reason that we're Packer fans, is to keep up the argument that Aaron Rodgers is the greatest of all time. And now you can't keep up that argument anymore. So I don't know what the fucking point of even rooting for them is. And you should have devoted more to winning that game. I think that you didn't win this game, that you fell into fear and embarrassment about you tightened up in coaching, in quarterback play, in defense. You tightened up in all these areas when you needed to put the pedal to the metal. Like, this game was the game you needed to win. You should have realized, you should have put all of your fears and nervousness behind you in recognition of the fact that this game had to fucking happen and you fucking let it go. And so now what the fuck is the point moving forward? We might as well just move on with Jordan Love, because unless we meet Tom Brady again next year and he loses this Super Bowl, he has to lose this Super Bowl now, and we have to meet him again in a once in a lifetime scenario where we play Tom Brady for the NFC Championship game. This was the fucking time for us to fucking beat him, and great job that you fucking didn't care enough. You didn't recognize the importance of the moment enough to set aside your nervousness for a few fucking seconds. I don't get that. I don't get why you had to play into the drama of the situation of having to perform for people in a game that was this necessary. When things get this fucking necessary, you need to put your differences aside, fucking win the game. It was a completely disappointing. Like, I don't know what I saw. I don't know what I watched, because whatever was on the field, they did not play with the urgency. They did not recognize the urgency of the situation, because that game needed to happen. And Tom Brady threw 3 interceptions. So that you're not able to make it happen when he does that is completely pathetic. But it's kind of a result of Aaron Rodgers has to face the pressure of the situation, because he's only won 1 Super Bowl during the course of his career. Tom Brady's won 6, doesn't have to face the pressure of the situation as much. But that you put Rodgers in that position by giving him no defense and no receivers during his entire career is the reason why he has to face the pressure of that situation. And it's like the pressure mounts year after year as he gets older and only has 1 Super Bowl. You could have taken the pressure off of him by contributing some minor amount of talent to the team over any contributions towards defense for the first decade that we had Aaron Rodgers would have helped, so that he would have won a Super Bowl, and the only Super Bowl he won, we were last in the league in defense. So, but if you maybe had given him a receiver or 2, that might have helped. But in this case, I can't even blame the Packers receivers, because the Tampa Bay receivers are light years better, but a lot of them dropped passes. It wasn't the Buccaneers passing game that beat us. It was fear of the pressure of the situation that beat us. And this game was Aaron Rodgers' fault. So as far as the past is concerned, you can't change the past. You can only move forward with your shitty circumstances in the event that you lose to Tom Brady in the NFC Championship game. You have to move forward with how shitty things are. But you don't make your happiness about a football team. It's not, you think I try to do that though? Like, you think that there's anything that would change me making my happiness about whether a football team wins? So now that I am stuck with this thing in the past that I have to remember, it makes me unhappy to remember it. But you have good memories it's not like you only return to things that are the most sad. You also return to things that were very happy too. You can remember happy memories. But, when you look at the situation like the Packers losing to the Buccaneers, you only have to answer for what happened and try to make your team better. It's just that if you could be in a fatalistic mindset where you're like, we will always lose. We will never have a good situation again. We will always fail. I think the Packers fan base, they make their team stumble in the playoffs by introducing all of these challenges and obstacles that don't need to be there. Like, it seems like when the Packers make it to the playoffs, there's a lot of fatalistic, superstitious mindset among the Packers fan base that causes the team to face obstacles that are unnecessary. Like, you introduce obstacles into the situation like, oh, we're going to have all this bad luck, or it'll be an uphill battle the entire time. And I think that we have a fatalistic mindset, but the problem is you have to move on and be like, well, we can win it next year. And just, you can't have the fatalistic mindset that we'll always lose in the NFC Championship game, because curses are very past oriented also. Curses are past oriented because you're like, we are always the cursed team. And like Chicago, your city can embody that. I think Chicago embodies that sometimes through their sports teams, but it's like when the Chicago Cubs aren't cursed anymore, then they kind of jump the shark, or then they're confused about their identity. Like, the Cubs it's a different thing to root for them after they win the World Series, because you're like, oh, a big part of our identity was that we were cursed. But you can make make your life a curse, and you're like, at this point, like whenever it happens in my life that I get here, then I fail, because there's a ceiling on what I'm able to do, because I'm always cursed or limited. Like a curse is like a limit in that way. You're always limited, that when you reach this boundary, you won't be able to surpass it because you're cursed. But the more you give power to your past, you give power to a curse, like a pattern that developed in your past. Like, this pattern is what's true about me. This is what dictates my life, is that I will always do this pattern at this precipice or this opportunity. And you're like superstitiously give power to that. And you can give power to a curse and say that you're always cursed. Like the Packers do that a little bit. Maybe Aaron Rodgers does that in his mind. Like at the NFC Championship game, I always lose, like because something always goes wrong. There's always bad luck at the end, because you can be cursed. And it would seem to me that Midwestern teams playing the curse is a lot more. They're like, oh, we're cursed. But the Midwest is kind of a little bit more about saying that they're cursed, because they like to complain about their circumstances that they can't overcome, because these things will always happen. Just like complaining is a little bit like giving into a curse by itself, because you're like, I can't change my circumstances. I am cursed. I am limited. Saying that you're limited doesn't help you. But like, so you can play into curses, and like that is past oriented. You're thinking your life is defined by the pattern that's proven itself in your past, so that is going to keep coming through to today. And so it limits your usefulness going forward, because you're like, I have a ceiling because I'm always this way. And that's what my story is. I mean, you can play into your story and be like, my story is that I always have this problem. And because I'm always limited by this curse in my life, because of the way that the past has lined up. This has always happened when this happened. So it's like, you can look to a correlation and get superstitious about it and be like, this always means this. If this, then this. And so it's like looking at a sign and being like, this sign, like as a bad omen, because this bad omen always means, like, if you're always about to get a promote, you're like, once I try to get promoted to this level of promotion, I always screw up, or like I always give a bad interview, because this, like, it's a sign, because it's like the boundary at which, or the threshold at which I'm unable to surpass. Like, that's the sign. It's like, if I see this kind of opportunity, then I will never be able to meet it, because based on the way, but you know what I mean? It's just like, you look at a sign, or you look at an omen. You look at a sign as an omen, and then you give power to the omen and act like signs are the problem, when it's like, you just kind of you can make things about your story sometimes. You can make things about like the chain of events that led up to where you are. You can make things about destiny. And then when you make things about destiny, you're like, my past. You can make things about destiny, and you're like, whatever got me here is nothing that I did. So that's kind of saying that you don't have control over your circumstances. Like, whatever's happening in my life, I can kind of ignore it, because whatever got me here is because of destiny. I'm always destined to do this one thing in the future. And so I don't contribute to what gets me anywhere, because where I am is just a result of destiny. And so then you're kind of looking, in that case, you're always looking at signs and omens, because you're just waiting on destiny to make you arrive at the right place. And so if you think that you can't change your own circumstances, you're like, I get myself to where I am, then you aren't like, I mean, I don't know. There's something limiting about destiny is what I'm saying. Also, there's something cursing about it a little bit. You're cursed because if you have a destiny, that means you have a single destination. So you're pretty limited to your destiny. If you really, really give power to destiny, then you are cursed to always arrive at the same destination. And rather than that, you can imagine yourself to arrive at different destinations, or imagine yourself to make your own choices. So like ignoring your past is kind of, or like living in the past is like saying that you are limited by your choices rather than that you have new options for choices going forward, that you still get to choose your circumstances, like, and that your choices are unlimiting because you always have more of them, rather than recognizing that in the moment you have all these choices. If you go to the past, you're like, I don't have choices because my choices are what already happened. Like, my choices, I don't have new ones now. The choices that I had, I used them all up, and now I'm living within the limits of them because it is the decisions I made in the past that make me who I am. And if I could make those choices better, then I would, like, I resonate on making them better, or like thinking about how I could have done better, because I'm always living in my past choices. So I'm always perfecting them. But the more that you go into perfecting your past choices, is the less that you recognize, like, you devote your choice energy to perfecting previous ones rather than making new ones. Then you live in the past, or you give yourself over to, like, it's destiny, or I was always cursed to arrive here. Like, so it was always going to happen. So there's nothing I could do. And so I am limited. So those are just like opposing. There are, like, maybe it's 50% of people are like, I can choose things. I still have control over my circumstances. 50% of people say that they don't have control over it. But it's too bad that the old Packers. So as a Packers fan, you just we have to win the next Super Bowl. Rodgers still has to win like 4 Super Bowls. He can still do it. He just needs one. It's all right. We'll fix it. He just recognize that you're blaming the right things, though. Don't lie to yourself about the past. You have to recognize your shortcomings, or else you will never succeed in the future, because your same shortcomings will undo you if you don't address those. You need to address your problems correctly and really, like, face, because it's tough to face what your actual flaws are. But this is just a motivational speech at this point. And just remember your past, and just live in the past, and whatever, just go back into your past and think about your memories, and think about what you used to be, and think about what you wish that you were, and just like that think of what you're not accomplishing, think of what you're not achieving now, think of what you could have achieved. Go to your past, think of what you could have achieved, imagine the possibilities of what you could have achieved, rather than make that happen now. Think about, just indulge in the familiarity of what you knew from before, because you've already lived it, because you've already lived those events. Live in the past, indulge in what could have been. Think about, because that's what's sad, is what could have been, or what you lost, or what you remember, or what doesn't happen anymore, or what isn't in front of you that you knew was true to some extent. When the truth of something is lost, and it's lost on people, and you know the value of it, but nobody else does. When you know the value of things that are lost and other people don't get to see it, and it's not remembered, that things are forgotten, is sad, is the past, that things have passed, that they're gone now. When something is gone, when it used to be right in front of you, something that was in front of you that you saw the value of, saw the beauty of, that you recognized what was so good about it, and now it's gone. And now people don't get to see what it was exactly, because they're just on their new shit, and they don't give power to what used to be. But like people that aren't sentimental, that's sad that you recognize that people move on without sentiment, is sad, that people forget who they were, that people forget what times used to be. When people forget, you see people not act the way that they used to be when they used to have so much energy. That's sad. When you see other people age, that's sad. You see other people, because people forget their past, and that's sad. You recognizing somebody else not being something special about them that they've lost. When you recognize what people have lost, what's past about another person, and what's gone about them, then that's sad. And it's just, it's sad that when you see what was possible, like the potential of something, and when that is gone, when the specific version of potential of it, and you're just like, but it's just kind of like, you always have the potential now to make new things happen. But when you're like, this is what could have been, that is what is past about your life. That is what is over. What is over is, it's sad that things end what has ended. It's you, then you are only left with resonating on it if you want to go back to it, because some things had such a big impact to you that there's nothing you can do about returning to it. Of course you return to it because things have such a big impact sometimes. And then that you want to share that with other people. That's like, you bring that up about your story, you recognize, but like some things are special to you that you can't ignore that they were special. And so you can't help but talk about it or try to explain the impact of it to yourself. Some things happen to you that are so impactful that you're still processing them. And so of course you return, you try to understand what the value of it was, but we're all trying to recognize the transcendent, right? We're all trying to make things special about our lives. We're all trying to then communicate that specialness about ourselves to other people. We're all trying to connect through our love for each other, and like loving somebody is like two people exchanging what they are burdened with to some extent, so they don't have to live with their pasts, but like that your past would be accepted. That your past would be accepted means that you don't have to live with the sadness of the value that you need to share with the rest of the world, that somebody would love you and accept you, or like to the extent that they accept your past, then your past is validated. Like the set of decisions that you made during the course of your life becomes validated if somebody accepts your past. And so then you don't have to wonder about why you are where you are at the point that your past is accepted, because your decisions have been validated. And it's like your reality is valid if you feel like your past is being accepted. And like, it's like, and it's sad otherwise. It's sad if you are longing for people to know about your past, or longing for something to be more exposed about it, or longing to get closure. Because if you're always going back to the past, it means you don't have closure. You're trying to end something that already ended, but to you it hasn't. And so you go back and think about it because the value of it hasn't yet been communicated to the world or communicated to yourself. And so you have to uncover it or process it more, because something so valuable happened in your past that you need to share it, but like you can't, because for some things you can't share them, and then they just become curses or limiting features to you, because you are, so much of your life is being taken away for you to think about this past thing that isn't practical anymore, that it is like, it's, well, I don't know, that it's limiting to you. Does it contribute to you to feel sad about something that you weren't able to share, about some valuable thing from your past? Like it's just something you have to live with, but it's kind of like it makes you guilty so that you have to live with it. And because it's guilty to not share things that you should share because they were impactful enough that they're continuously taking up a place in your mind, makes you guilty that you didn't share the energy of a situation when the energy was speaking itself to be important enough that it's stuck around in your mind. You feel guilty about not explaining things, and that makes you sad, like that you have to deal with the guilt of like, this was impactful enough and like meaningful enough that people could have benefited further, something like that. You don't unlock the full potential of past situations, and what you've lost as a result of not unlocking it gives you sadness. And like the things from the past are just that you try to remember them. You try to remember them, but you don't ever get to remember them the right way either. There's only that you wish the past was the present, when it's like all that you have is the present. It's sad to make a previous time period this one, because it doesn't work out, because you can't go back in time. But think about that, and talk to you later. Peace out.